Listen carefully. The moment an empath stops caring is not a phase. It's not temporary. It's not emotional burnout. It's permanent. And by the time you realize it, you've already lost them. Not emotionally, but completely. Because the most terrifying moment in any relationship isn't the arguments. It isn't the shouting. It isn't even the pain. It's the silence. The kind of silence that feels unnatural, heavy, final. The kind of silence that comes from a person who once felt everything for you and now feels nothing at all. Most people misunderstand how relationships actually end. They think the breaking point is loud, explosive, chaotic. They imagine slammed doors, angry words, emotional breakdowns. But those moments, as painful as they are, still carry something alive inside them. Anger is alive. Pain is alive. Even frustration is alive. Because all of it still requires energy. It still requires connection. It means deep down, something is still holding on. But when an empath reaches their limit, something very different happens. There is no explosion, no dramatic ending, no final speech, just a quiet shift, so subtle that you might miss it completely. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because by the time you notice it, it's already too late. Empaths don't leave quickly. They don't give up easily. In fact, they do the opposite. They stay, long after they should have walked away. They stay through confusion, through inconsistency, through emotional neglect. They try to understand. They try to fix. They try to heal what was never theirs to heal. And this is where everything begins to slowly fall apart. Because an empath doesn't just see who you are. They see who you could be. They fall in love with potential, with possibilities, with a version of you that exists only in their mind. And so they stay hoping, waiting, believing that one day something will change. That one day their effort will be enough. That one day you will meet them at the same depth they've been giving all along. But reality doesn't work that way. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin to abandon themselves. Every time they say, it's okay, when it's not, they lose a piece of themselves. Every time they ignore their own needs, they push themselves further into the background. Every time they forgive without change, they teach the other person that nothing has consequences. And all of this builds something invisible. Pressure. According to Carl Jung, the human psyche cannot remain unbalanced forever. If one side is suppressed for too long, the other side will eventually rise to restore balance. This is not a choice. It's a psychological law. So when an empath suppresses their anger, their boundaries, their truth, those things don't disappear. They accumulate, quietly, like water filling a glass drop by drop. At first, it seems manageable. Then it gets close to the edge. And then one day, without warning, it overflows. Jung called this process anheidromia. The moment when something becomes its opposite. Love becomes indifference. Care becomes distance. Attachment becomes detachment. And when this shift happens, it doesn't happen gradually. It happens all at once. There is always a moment. A small, almost insignificant moment. No drama. No chaos. Just a realization. A quiet sentence in the mind. I'm done. And in that moment, everything changes. The emotional connection shuts down. Not partially. Not temporarily. Completely. The person who once cared deeply, who once gave endlessly, who once stayed no matter what, suddenly feels nothing. No urge to fix. No desire to explain. No need to stay. And this is the part that confuses people most. Because it looks like coldness. It looks like they've changed overnight. But the truth is, this didn't happen overnight. This was built over weeks, months, sometimes years, silently, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to give. For most of their life, the empath has been operating from only one side of themselves. The soft side, the understanding side, the forgiving side. They rejected anything that felt harsh, selfish, or distant. They believed being good meant being available. Always. But every human being has another side, a shadow, a part that protects, that sets limits, that knows when to walk away. And when this shadow is ignored for too long, it doesn't disappear. It waits, it watches, and eventually it takes control. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in clarity. This is where the transformation truly begins. The empath stops running from their shadow and finally integrates it. They begin to understand something they never allowed themselves to believe before. That boundaries are not cruelty. That distance is not selfishness. That saying no is not wrong. For the first time in their life, they stop trying to be liked and start trying to be whole. They stop being a sponge and become a filter. They no longer absorb everything around them. They observe. They notice patterns. They see behavior for what it is, not what they hoped it could be. And with that clarity comes a kind of power they've never experienced before. Silence. Not the painful silence of confusion, but the calm silence of certainty. Something else begins to shift as well. Something even more profound. They become immune. The things that once controlled them no longer have any effect. Guilt doesn't work anymore. Hope doesn't trap them anymore. Manipulation becomes obvious. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing everything you believed was an illusion. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. For years, they didn't see reality clearly. They saw potential. They saw a possibility. They saw a future that never actually existed. But now, they see truth. Patterns that repeat. Promises that break. Effort that never matches. And once truth replaces illusion, attachment disappears. Not because they stopped caring suddenly, but because they finally started seeing clearly. This is where they enter the final stage. Indifference, not anger, not revenge. Indifference. They don't need to fight anymore. They don't need to prove anything. They don't need closure. They don't even need you to understand. They simply let go, and they do it quietly. No announcements, no explanations, no second chances, just absence. And that absence feels heavier than any argument ever could, because you can respond to anger, you can react to emotion, but you cannot do anything with someone who feels nothing. And by the time you realize what has happened, you begin to look back. You start replaying moments, conversations, missed chances. You notice the times they stayed when they should have left, the times they forgave when they should have walked away, the times they chose you when you didn't choose them back. And slowly, the truth becomes clear. You didn't lose them in one moment. You lost them gradually, in silence, in neglect, in patterns that never change. Because when an empath finally leaves, they are not running away from you. They are returning to themselves, to the parts they abandoned, to the boundaries they ignored, to the voice they silenced for too long. And this time, they're not coming back. Not because they hate you, not because they want revenge, but because they finally understand something that took them years to learn. That their energy is valuable, that their peace is important, that their presence is not something to be taken for granted. And once they understand that, everything changes. Completely, the person who once gave you everything becomes a person you can no longer reach. And that is the loudest silence you will ever experience.